Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Feller from Peru PD, almost 27 years total in law enforcement, has spent the last 24 years in Peru. He has a bachelor's of science in criminal justice and criminology, a master's in public safety, and a graduate of the FBI National Academy. Welcome to the show, Chief Feller. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course, give us a little bit of background. So, almost 27 years. You said 27 in December. Did you always know
Yeah,
you wanted to be in law enforcement, or how did you get started?
not at all. This was never anything on my radar, probably until I was about a sophomore in college doing my undergrad. My background from high school and then to start in college was actually in broadcasting. And my college roommate, that is what he does for a living now. But I was working a job for the state of Indiana and had some interactions with some law enforcement, and I think pretty quickly realized that their day is not the same every day. A lot
Mm.
of time spent outdoors. At the time, I like to hunt and fish, and I thought, maybe being a conservation officer or depending on where you are, a wildlife officer would be something I would be interested in. So I changed my major at Ball State University to a criminal justice track, and the rest is kind of history. And started off with our sheriff's department, as you mentioned. It'll be 27 years ago in December, and then made the transition here to Peru PD in June of 2002.
Thank you. Okay, so you were on track to being a broadcaster. So when you say that, in my mind, public speaking is not a fear of yours. That's actually a strength of yours. Yes?
Exactly. It is
Okay.
not a fear that I have at this point. No.
Do you think that public speaking and effective communication is something that is essential for leadership positions in law enforcement? And what tips and tricks could you share with people who maybe are a little bit afraid of that?
Well, I think effective communication is important no matter what
Mm.
industry you happen to be in, but it is very important in law enforcement that, particularly from the top down, that we have to communicate. Our people have to be informed about what's going on, not only in the department, but what's going on in the community. Um, what I've really found interesting is a younger generation is now entering the workforce to include our departments, that the style of communication has to be a little bit different than what maybe it was when I came on. The why is very important in nearly everything that we do to the generation that is now entering the workforce. So a lot of the communication, maybe that would have been, "Hey, rookie, go out and direct traffic here." In my day, when it would have just been effectively snapping to attention and saying, "Yes, that's what I'll go do." It may require that I tell them why it's important that they do that.
Mm.
And I think you can say probably the same thing in any industry at this point. But if you don't, particularly with the generation of employees that I have, we're a very young department. If I'm not very clear in my communication with them, it may be lost on them exactly what I'm looking for and exactly what the standard to which I want the work to be completed is supposed to look like. So I think that is 100% from an organizational standpoint important. Obviously, the public relies on the police, particularly to generate good, accurate, quality information. And so, there were a lot of things that I didn't know about how to effectively do that until I spent 10 weeks at the FBI National Academy taking training on how to effectively communicate to the public. So we try to utilize some of those principles that I learned there in our community. I think our public generally wants us to have um, effective communication that is going to be accurate, that they can trust coming from us. So we work very hard to try to do those things here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious because one, I think you're spot on. If you want to train and develop people and you want the message to come across, then you have to understand who your audience is and how they
Agreed.
receive information. And we almost have to be super adaptable and be able to say the same thing 50 different ways because we know that everyone is different in the way that they receive or the way that they learn, which is another skill set within itself to the communicator. But I know you have a younger force. Are you seeing that the younger generation is coming in and maybe more timid to speak to people, maybe because of technology, text messages? They don't have to maybe be out in front as maybe we used to when we didn't have those things. We were talking offline about how we come from the older generation and we didn't have all the
Yes.
technology. And do you have any tips and tricks for them to get comfortable talking to people and, having that body language and that eye contact and, being able to have confidence when they speak?
I don't know about necessarily any tips or tricks, but we do have to have a lot of conversation. I probably spend a little more time educating some of our workforce more than I do administrating.
Mm,
Uh, but I would agree with you. Some of our folks are really tech savvy, and they spend a lot of time on social media, uh, going back to how we communicate. For them to talk to me on the telephone, they would prefer a text message versus probably anything at this point. So there are some challenges there because I think the generation that's coming in has spent so much time communicating in front of a screen. Uh, Probably where I see that more than anything is they may be a little uncomfortable having some conversations with some of our victims about
mm,
particular things that have happened. But those are necessary details that we need to complete an accurate investigation. But more likely, it's on confronting perhaps a suspect with something, and those are challenges that we have to overcome. And my experience tells me, I spent the majority of my career in investigations, is the more that we do it, the better off we are.
yeah.
So, we spend some time sending them to training on how to interview people, how to interrogate suspects, those types of things. But in practice is where it really boils down to the more that you do it, the more you develop your own style, the better you become at it. So we just try to encourage them to go out and have those conversations that may be uncomfortable. That's all part of growth, no matter what those uncomfortable conversations look like, whether it's with a suspect, a victim, or a coworker. They're necessary conversations, and so it just we spend a lot of time trying to encourage them to do those things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I mean, we can always take trainings and we can always understand the importance, or maybe we can learn certain skill sets, but there's really no substitution for getting out and doing it. But lucky for you guys, you have a lot of opportunities out in the community to have those conversations and to hone in your skills. And I used to be so scared to talk in public. And to the point where like I would black out. Like I was like, what happened? Like I don't even know what happened. One-on-one's fine. A whole group of people looking at me, so scary. And I don't think that I ever would have gotten more comfortable with that if I didn't do it more. I could have taken 100 communication classes where they told me, you know, imagine everyone in their underwear or, have your breathing techniques beforehand or whatever. But getting in front and actually doing the thing builds more confidence in your ability to do the thing.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
One of the things I did want to ask before we move on to talking a little bit more about wellness, I noticed in your bio that you are really involved with a lot of organizations and boards that are associated with substance abuse support and recovery. And I was wondering if there was a specific reason why that was so important to you, because I think there's maybe three or four of them that you're on.
Yes. So, I mean, within my family, there has been a history of substance use disorder. It was always kept very quiet, but within the family, we always knew. Um, certainly affected some relationships, but never anything that directly impacted me. Not my parents, anything like that. None of my siblings, as far as I'm aware. Um, but I kind of fell into kind of the recovery world. there was a member of our community that I've known my entire career, and we dealt with her. I've arrested her, but just always seemed like a genuinely good person and was very vulnerable, it seemed like, particularly in her relationships, and the relationships all centered around drug use. And so, kind of to give you the Reader's Digest version, she got arrested. I don't remember when, probably 2021, something like that. And she had a conversation with me and tried to lie about she'd gotten arrested for a drug charge and tried to lie to me about it. And I effectively said, look, when you're ready to be honest with me about what's going on and you want some actual help, I'll try to connect you with some resources that I know in the community. And that conversation, again, another uncomfortable conversation that I felt like was a necessary conversation, ended up receiving a call back. We have a problem solving court in our community. It's the Miami County Drug Court. I felt like, knowing her for as long as I had known her, that she really didn't need prison. She had a son at home that she was trying to raise. What she really, I felt like, needed was some structure in her life and to learn some life skills. And so I made a recommendation, which I almost never do, to our prosecutor's office and said, hey, I really feel like she would be a really good candidate for your drug court program. Can you possibly look at that as an option? And they did. So when that happened, the director of our drug court knew that I had made that recommendation, and there was an opening because a law enforcement officer sits on the drug court team. And she asked me if I would be interested in sitting on their staff. So at the time, I was the assistant chief of police, and so I had some flexibility in my schedule to be able to do that, and so I did, and it's really been one of the great pleasures of my career. I, I wish that it would have happened to me sooner in my career than it did. I have a much better understanding of those who are struggling with addiction and those who are struggling to maintain their sobriety and recovery. And so, because of the relationships with our clients, some of the boards, some of the recovery community boards that we have, um, found out that I was on drug court, that I had pretty good working relationships with our clients, and part of that is building trust with our clients. Um, so they asked me to be a part of that, and I've not had the heart to tell them no. So
Mhm.
uh, I've and I'm happy to do the work in that community because I feel like that is one of the problems in our community is drug use. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem, and so it requires investment from community leaders to kind of double down on that and find resources for the people who are trying to beat their addictions and maintain their recovery. So I feel like it's a very much a worthwhile effort, and it makes our community better as a whole. I've watched with my own eyes people's lives change as a result of the work that's being done by so many people in our community that are invested. So it's a worthwhile investment, in my opinion.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that that stuck out so much to me because that's something that's near and dear to my heart. And when I first started in the wellness space, I worked in recovery centers. My parents were both drug addicts. My mom is still active in her addiction. My dad has since recovered and he now has a job and, he found the church and, he's has his life together. So I have seen, every angle of addiction, but then it was something that I also wanted to help with when I started in the wellness space. And so I worked in detox and long-term inpatient facilities. And I appreciate you saying that you notice the human side of someone and realize that just because someone has an addiction doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person. And I think that we have to be able to differentiate that sometimes. And I think that comes with empathy and emotional intelligence and really trying to remove the behavior from the human. And I was just talking to someone recently and they said, not everyone, it was a chief, he goes, not everyone we arrest is evil. Some people need help. Some people, make bad decisions. Not everybody is, inherently bad or evil. Some people are, of course, but I think because I came from that background and I saw what that did to my parents, I saw how that impacted me as the child. I was working in facilities where, I was in direct contact with individuals who were really trying their best to recover and get sober. I think that it holds a special place in my heart, and I have a lot of empathy for that. And so I love the work that you're doing. I think that that's great.
Thank you. And I agree with you. And part of that experience came, my start was at the sheriff's department working in the jail.
Mm,
So a lot of preconceived notions about what I thought about the criminal element was changed when I got to know the people that I was housing effectively and trying to take care of. That figured out that the majority of these folks, they may have made one bad decision that landed them where they were, or a series of bad decisions. But generally speaking, they were decent people, and so that was a good springboard into just the policing world in general. But yeah, I think the more that you know about addiction, that the majority of people, I think if you were to probably poll most Americans, they would say drug use or severe alcohol use is a choice. And what I've come to find out through interaction, both on the street and particularly in our problem solving court, is that is absolutely not the case. Most of it is a result of some type of trauma that's happened to them earlier in their lives. And so it's important to recognize that and try to figure out how do we get those folks services not only for their addiction but for whatever past traumas that they may have that led to the beginning of their addiction. So
yep.
that's all part of the human element, as you mentioned. So we have to recognize that they are human beings first, and not try not to attach labels to those folks.
Yeah, and I was actually going to mention that. I'm so glad that you did because I I had someone recently, they were talking about the drug problem, and you said earlier, you're like, we can't arrest our way out of this thing, and we see it in large metropolitan areas. There's a lot of homeless, a lot of drugs, a lot of things that are going on. And I had a chief tell me one time, he was like, we don't have a drug problem, we have a mental health problem. And the idea was exactly what you said, is like, what led them to make those decisions in the first place? Is it a mental health crisis? Is it a trauma? And when I, my, so my fiance and I are completely different when we look at things. Like, I drive down the road and I ask those questions. I'm like, what life did they have? What upbringing led them to this? And I ask those questions of, what did they go through to get to this point? And he didn't have that same upbringing, so doesn't have that same, he's very like black and white with his thought
Sure.
process. But I think we have to look at that. And I think we can even relate this to the law enforcement profession. We know that alcoholism is something that we're looking at, and why are people choosing unhealthy coping mechanisms? What are they going through mentally? What traumas did they go through to choose to reach for that thing that is going to help relieve some of that pain, right? So I think it's when we look at it's not just the community. We're also looking at the first responder profession as people who are starting to reach for some of these substances. And I think we have to look at the beginning and ask ourselves why. And then how can we be proactive on the front end to try to reduce that risk from happening in the future? But then how can we also make sure that we address it if and when it happens and they have the resources that they need to be able to recover and move forward?
I completely agree with all that. When I started in this profession, that was the normal thing. We didn't have healthy coping mechanisms. We didn't really talk about the traumas maybe that we experienced ourselves or witnessed. And so it was just, hey, suck it up. And, we know that those traumas build up over time, and eventually it's going to leak out somewhere. And so it's refreshing. I think part of the responsibility of people in my generation in this profession is that we have to change that, and we have to lead the way for the generation that's coming in to let them know if you're struggling, it's okay. And you need to let us know, and that there should be no penalty to that. that we are understanding we are here to take care of you because our the folks that work for us, the overwhelming majority of our budget is spent in personnel. So they are the most expensive and the best asset that we have. And so we have to maintain the assets that we have in our profession. And so that's one of the ways that we can do that. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I say all the time, I always draw parallels between law enforcement and sports. And have you ever heard, like in professional sports, them say, like, protect the assets at all
Yeah.
costs? So I think of that. It's like, you guys are the assets. How do we protect you at all costs? And I think it starts with being proactive. And, to your point, when you first started, it wasn't a focus, it wasn't a part of the conversation. It was, choir practice or going to church, whatever you called it in your area, and that was the norm. And now I think things are shifting and it looks very different. And I know wellness is something that you guys are prioritizing in your organization. And I wanted to start by asking you about this because I thought this was really interesting. When we talk about wellness, a lot of times we think of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, but you guys focus a lot on professional development and leadership development. Do you think that professional development is another facet of wellness that can help with that longevity and being more proactive within the organization?
Yes. So I think if the folks who work for us, I mean, we're a small agency. We're an agency of 28 people. And our agency, as I mentioned, is very young. I have a retirement that's coming up in July. A 26-year veteran of our department is getting ready to retire. After he retires, there are three of us who are eligible for retirement after 20 or among 28 people. So I know that I'm in the twilight of my career. Um, and so I have a duty and an obligation to make sure that our folks are prepared to take over the reins in a pretty short period of time.
Mm.
Um, and it's important that they know how to do that because we cannot have any gaps in the services that we provide to our community, because then it's just a disservice to our community. But
Right.
within that, we have been very blessed in our city that our mayor and our city council has made some pretty significant financial investments in our department in terms of wages and benefits for our folks. And that's only happened within the last 2 years. So prior to, I haven't really changed my philosophy, but prior to that, trying to get people to stay here and retain them was talking to the command staff and saying, we are going to control what we can control within these four walls. We may not be able to control the financial component to it, but we can control the culture, the environment that we have to make it a great place to come to work
Mhm.
so that they don't want to leave us to go to maybe a neighboring agency that makes a little more money than we do. We now have a pretty competitive wage for our area, but that philosophy, in my opinion, doesn't really change. We still have to make it a great place to work. And part of that is happy employees are employees who get to do the things that they want to do, things that they're passionate about doing. So I have a pretty good training budget. So when our folks come to me and say, I want to do, this is the track that I want to go down. And I feel like I would rather, if there are people who want to be promoted, it's better to have them prepared to take on a promotion versus promoting them and just throwing the keys to them and say, you figure it out.
Right.
So I think that what the career development path gives them is just a little bit of hope for the future. And so if we can provide hope, that obviously I think boosts their morale personally. We're always going to have some folks somewhere along the line who may be a little negative, but I think that if they get a little bit of hope and they're positive, then that drowns out a lot of the negative energy that comes through our doors. So I think part of it is just trying to control what we are capable of controlling. The rest of it we can't.
Right.
So just focus on the things we can.
Yeah, I like it. And I do think that when you're working towards something, it keeps you out of trouble. I'm going to put this in quotes, out of trouble a little bit. Like if you have something where you're like, yeah, I know that the department's investing in me, they value me. I'm working towards, becoming a supervisor, or I'm working towards, this certification. I think that helps to reduce burnout because you, like you said, you have hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You don't feel like you're just in the trenches and grinding it out every day. You have something that you're working towards. And I think when people have a connection to that, it helps us to make better, healthier decisions because we want to be successful. I think where
Yes.
we start to get in trouble a little bit is when we don't have that and there doesn't feel like there's an end in sight and everything feels heavy. We don't feel like we have that forward momentum. And at least that's for me. Like speaking of my past experience, that is when I've been the most unhealthy, the most unhappy, is when I didn't have kind of that North Star of where I was going. And that's not to say that you can't stay in the same role or position for a period of time, but like, how do we continue to develop ourselves within those roles? How do we become the best version of ourselves and continue to upgrade, even if we're not necessarily rising through the ranks, And so I think that when you have a North Star, it helps you to make better decisions.
I agree. And, Paul Butler, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's a national law enforcement trainer, talks about the different roles within an agency being a team leader, a team builder, a teammate, or trouble. And so if
Mhm.
you don't fall into one of those top three categories, then you're in trouble. And, we were fortunate enough to have Paul here in Peru back in February to train our entire department and some other community leaders. And so we've had those conversations several times when people have come in and say, "What's going on with you? Where are you at in that, in those four categories?"
Mm.
And when they really reflect on it, they'll be like, "I'm trouble. So what do we need to do to get you out of trouble? Where do you need to go so that we can help you get out of that funk and find a positive way to do this?"
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you're right. There has to be a light at the end of the tunnel, something to motivate them.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things that we are trying to work on here. Um, Again, it benefits everybody. There's no downside to career development.
Yeah. You see it time and time again. I'm going to draw this back to sports again, but you see this time and time again. Kids who are in sports typically aren't in trouble as much as other people. Why? Because you have the accountability, you want to show up for your teammates, you have a goal in mind, you want to be successful in that season, you want to win the games, whatever that looks like, right? So you don't see a lot of kids who are always in sports causing a lot of trouble. So I think that makes total sense. And then there was a story. Have you watched this is so random, but this is how my brain works. Have you watched the documentary called The Crash? It was in
I did
Ohio.
actually. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah. I actually watched that. I was in Texas last week for my niece's high school graduation. I watched that on the flight to Houston.
yeah, so really interesting, right? And it was about a car crash with these young individuals. The girl drove the car into, like at 100 miles an hour, into a wall, killing the two passengers. And then she was injured, but she survived, right? But there was the backstory of one of the kids that was in the car that ended up passing away, that he started getting into trouble after he got injured. He was in football forever and then he got injured, stopped playing sports, and then started kind of going down a path of, drugs and partying and kind of getting in trouble. And so I think we start to see that when you don't have that purpose, what decisions do you start making? And so I think for me, it's really important for me to have short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals so that it keeps me on track to understand, okay, what do I want to achieve? How do I get there? What are the steps that I need to take today? And then how can I take care of myself in the best possible way so that I can be the most effective when I reach those goals? Because for me, I'm an overachiever. I want to be the best at whatever I do. And I think a lot of people in law enforcement are the same way. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And so I think if you have time to self-assess and ask yourself those questions, am I trouble? Am I a teammate? Am I a team builder? Am I a leader? Were those the four ones?
Team builder, team leader, teammate, and trouble.
Trouble. Okay.
Yeah,
So self-assess, ask yourself those questions, be honest with yourself, and then how can we develop those short-term, mid-term, long-term goals so that we can have that accountability, but then we can have that North Star.
I agree. And I can tell you, probably all of us have fallen into one of those four categories. I've been trouble,
Hmm.
no doubt about it. But then when you sit back and you reflect and say, why was I trouble? And it's, most of the time it boils down to me. It's not other people. And I agree with you. Finding your purpose is 100% important. And I feel like purpose, again, the why, finding our purpose is ultimately it's important for everybody, but it's very important for the generation that's entering the workforce now.
Yeah.
It's very similar to Simon Sinek's book, uh, Start with Why.
Yep.
Why do we do what we do? Why do we do this job? And none of us do this for the money. There's ultimately a reason why we do this job, and that purpose can change over time. So, but I
I
agree, we should self-reflection is great to figure out why am I doing what I'm doing and really put that back into focus.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that purpose can change over time because we're not going to be the same people that we were when we were 20 years old as we are when we're 30, 40,
Agreed.
50, all the way down the line. And so I think it's important to have those moments of like, okay, like, has it changed or is it the same? Has it changed, but maybe my lens, or has it stayed the same, but maybe my lens has changed a little bit, because we're hopefully always trying to develop and improve ourselves as we go along. But I have found that in my hardest times, the times where like I want to quit for whatever reason, reconnecting with the why and the purpose has always gotten me through. And I think we've all been there. We've all had those hard times where we just feel really defeated and we're like, man, like, am I having the impact that I set out to have? Like, do I want to continue doing this? And then when we go back to the why, the answer is there. It's worthwhile. It's worth the stress, and we can get through it. But I think without putting that in perspective, it's hard. It's hard when you're in the trenches and you don't have, a reason why you're there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I face that every day. Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, I think
So
that's
yeah,
relatable. Yeah. Um, You obviously, and we're not gonna have enough time to go over everything, but I did want to just mention that you guys are focusing on a lot of different facets of wellness within the
yes,
organization. And so I don't know if we want to take maybe a moment, just kind of bullet point, some of those things that you guys are doing. But then my actual question for you, because this is the burning question that I think every chief across the country is asking themselves is, you said control the controllable, create an environment that is healthy, create a workplace where people want to be here, focus on wellness and professional development. But then how do you get people to buy into these things? How do you get people to participate and actually take action for themselves?
sure. So probably one of the first things that I did when I took over as the chief in 2024 was I hired a clinical psychologist that is on retainer for our department. She comes at least once a year and does training with our people. We've had to force people to go see her occasionally. And she does, if we have any type of critical incident debriefs, she's the one who comes and does it. So our people are very familiar with our clinical psychologist. They seem to trust her. The great thing for our people is they don't pay a dime for anything that happens. If they need to go see the doc, they go see the doc. I get an invoice for it without a name on it. It's just a random number assigned with that, and I know then that our people are utilizing it as I'm turning in the bill to pay it. So that has been really, really good for us. And part of the way that obviously we have her come in to give training to our people so that they know her, but I can tell you that I have utilized her. No one would ever think that a chief of police, I think, would ever have a necessity to go talk to a clinical psychologist, but just I recognize some things in myself, somewhat recently, actually, that I felt like I probably was not behaving as I normally would. And there were some physical symptoms that accompanied that. And so I finally just got to a point where I said, you know what? I really need to go see the doc. I need to go talk to her. Um, those are still ongoing conversations with her. I have an appointment with her next week, but I make no secret about that to the people that work for me. I want them to know that I'm willing to talk about it, that I am willing to utilize this service, and that there should be no shame on their end if they ever go and talk to her. And I've had guys that have gone and talked to her, then I don't know that they're going to talk to her, but then they would come back and tell me how that went to a certain degree, whether it was helpful for them. And I haven't had anybody come back from talking to her that it has not been helpful. So I think among our people, if they see the chief doing what we're if I'm practicing what I preach to them, but the word of mouth among the coworkers themselves is probably the best thing that we have going for us. That those who have utilized it have come back and said, "Hey, I went and this worked for me. If you've got this going on, you should probably go."
Mhm.
Um, so that component was one of the first things that I did, and I'm working with a local pastor now on trying to get a chaplain program started up. We've never had one in the history of our department that I'm aware of. So we're kind of in the infancy stages of that, but I would imagine that will happen before I'm done being chief. We are fortunate. We have a fully we have an amazing gym in our department. It encompasses two very large rooms in our department. So free weights, cardio, anything you could possibly want, we have it. We upgraded that equipment through a grant. Well, not through a grant, but through me basically harping on our mayor at the time until he finally got tired of hearing me and gave me the money to improve our gym and replace all of our equipment. So that's available to our people and their families 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that is always an option for them. It costs them nothing. We even give them an hour, depending on manpower, an hour every day that they can go and work out for free in our facility. Um, the challenge that I have right now with that is trying to get buy-in to that.
Mm.
Um, we do give our people an annual physical test if they want to opt in. Gives them a free day off if they complete the test. There are multiple days that they can do that throughout the year. But that still doesn't seem to get a lot of buy-in. So I'm struggling, if I'm being honest with you, trying to figure out how to get them invested in the physical component to it.
Mm.
Um, we're working on that, asking for ideas among the people that we have. What would motivate you to do that?
Yeah.
Um, so trying to put something together there. We've taken care of our folks physically. We had Sigma Tactical Wellness here several years ago that did a full metabolic and cardiac screening on all of our folks. Surprisingly, I was one of the people who ended up having to go on a statin as a result of that. But quite frankly, that saved my life.
Yeah.
And I know several of our other people. So we're making a lot of investments in the health of our people because our goal, when we hire these folks, we make sure that they're physically and mentally healthy. And my goal is that when they retire, that they are equally as physically and mentally healthy as they were the day that they started here.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, you know, no one is immune to stress, including
Right.
the chief.
Yep.
And for you to be like, yeah, I go and talk to someone because I'm also human and this job can get to me too. And it's helpful for me to do these things. And I do think that that creates more safety and trust within the
Yep.
organization that you're willing to do what you're asking them to do. But I don't know. I think this goes back to what we were saying before with communication and having to understand the intricacies of each person within the organization. Everyone's going to be motivated by different things. So when it comes to buy-in and like how do we get people to take action, one of the things that I've done that I've felt has been successful, and you can steal this or not, either way, but I would ask people, I would go to briefing training and I would ask them, what is your wellness why? So, not what is your professional law enforcement why, but like, why is it important for you to be physically fit or mentally fit or, why? And I got a lot of different answers. And so I think this goes back to like what motivates everybody. I think everyone's going to be a little bit different. And so it's not a one size fits all. I've shared this before because I just thought it was hilarious. I thought it was the perfect answer. It was a younger guy. I would say he was probably like mid to late 20s. And he was like, I just want my wife to be attracted to me. He's like, that's why it's important for me. He's like, I want my wife to think I'm hot. And I was like, that's a great answer. If that's going to motivate you to focus on your physical health because you want your partner to be attracted to you, great. And then I had other people that were like, it's my kids. Like, I want to be here for as long as possible for my kids. I had other people that are like, it's retirement. Like I don't want to be another statistic where I only get, 3 to 5 years in retirement. I want to have a long, fruitful retirement where I can run around with my grandkids and I can go travel and enjoy the fruits of my labor. So I think that we can have a separate why when it comes to our health and wellness. Why is that important to you? And again, that's going to change throughout your career because for those who don't have kids, their why is not going to be their kids. But then maybe as you start a family, your why changes. And so I think when you have that intrinsic motivator of, okay, I'm doing this for this big reason or this big why, then that helps to get people to take action. It's not a perfect system, but I have found that we've saw a lot of improvement with engagement by having people individually connect with that.
I would agree with everything you just said. I've worked out my entire career. And it started out, quite frankly, it was vanity. I
Hmm.
just didn't want to get fat. But as time went on, and I realized that the job that we do, we are professional athletes, whether you want to admit that or not, I
Agree.
get paid to come to work. And part of what I do for a living requires physical activity and being able to perform at an elite level
Hmm.
at a moment's notice. And if I were to, somebody were to get injured or die as a result of my inability to be able to physically do what I need to do, would be crushing mentally. As I've gotten older and I've kind of hit the stride in the twilight of my career, I'm more focused now on I just want to be healthy and I want to be able to live a long life when I do retire and enjoy the things, enjoy my life and be active and do a lot of the things that I want to do when I retire. So that why has changed,
Hmm.
but still, there's a mental component to that as well. I
Yeah.
want to be able to challenge myself physically to be able to do something that maybe I didn't think I could do or that somebody else thought that I couldn't do. So part of that, I get a lot of gym therapy, and that's been fantastic for me mentally throughout my career and continues to be that way. So I agree that why has changed for me over the course of the last 24 years. I can tell you that for sure.
Well, anyone who's listening to the podcast that knows me, I talk about you guys being professional tactical athletes all the time.
Yes.
So we're very aligned with that. I love that you said gym therapy. I had someone earlier today also said that they were training for retirement. So I thought that that was
Yeah.
really funny too. But my final question for you is for that younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with them that maybe you wish you would have known when you were younger?
I've thought a lot about this, and I've been blessed in my career that I've had some amazing folks that I've been around who've been mentors or um, supervisors that have helped me along the way. But the one thing, as I've sat and thought, is just enjoy the moment of where you are in your career because this career goes by so quickly. I feel like I blinked and I feel like I only have like 10 years on the job and I'm realistically at a point where I can retire and I just don't know where the time went. And I have enjoyed my time, but I think if I would have realized at a younger age in my career just how fast this really goes, that I would have taken the time to really, really soak it in and really enjoy more what I was doing at the time and not view it as much as a job, as much as a calling and appreciating that, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you spending an hour with me.
Yeah, thank you. Really an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this. So thank you for having me.
Of course.